Pure goes hyper. Salt Typhoon is now unprobed. AI mazes for fun and a little less profit. Swedish boat napping. OpenAI dials in an operator. There's going to be some DeepSeek discussion, and we're going to take a closer look at those potential TSMC tariffs in this episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown. Today is Wednesday, January the 29th, and I hope that you're having a snack or possibly your lunch right now, and you're enjoying it with some corn chips, because it is, in fact, National Corn Chip Day. And I promise you, we're going to be talking about chips, but not the corn variety. But if you want to try to figure out what we're going to be talking about, it's a bit of a puzzle, because it's also National Puzzle Day. Joining me, though, is no puzzle at all. It is one of my favorite co-hosts, Mr. Alistair Cook. Al, welcome back to the Rundown.
Thanks very much, Tom. And really, I find that every day is puzzle day because I'm still trying to work everything out as all of these signals come into us.
You know, that's how it goes. But fortunately, we're here to set everybody straight with some great news. And we're going to be talking about some of the fun stuff and, quite honestly, some of the not so fun stuff. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. And I'm going to go ahead and start off with this story, because predictions of the demise of storage technologies are about as regular as stories about the immortality of the very same technology. The recent announcement that Pure Storage has a deal with an unnamed hyperscaler to standardize on all flash storage design has once again brought the suggestion that hyperscalers might finally be ready to move on from spinning disks. All flash arrays have been around for quite a while, so Al, I have to ask the obvious question: is this really the end for spinning rust hard drives in cloud storage?
Well, I think the announcement itself is interesting. We've definitely seen the sort of steady transition from expensive, heavy, power-consuming, hot spinning rust storage towards smaller, denser, and lower power, and therefore less cooling, using solid-state storage. So this is not particularly new that this transition is happening. And I think Pure Storage made lots of noise about getting a contract with one of the hyperscalers. And at the moment, they haven't said which, but they have said there are only 4 hyperscalers. So there aren't too many options in there. And having this licensing deal around an all-flash architecture as their standard for storage. And I think this is very much the way a lot of storage movement is happening. And one of the big things is around that data center power footprint. And spinning hard drives consume power because they're spinning, even if they're not being accessed. Now, the vast majority of storage we know is not being accessed most hours, days, minutes. And so that sort of baseline power consumption for just holding data and not losing it drops a lot when you go to solid state. And I think this is very much a driver as we're seeing larger and larger solid state devices and larger data centers with larger and larger power footprints. So there's a big driver in the power. But does that mean that this is the right solution for every use case? Well, if somebody tells you that their solution is the right solution for every use case, they've probably got something to sell you and probably don't have anything else to sell you that would maybe fit elsewhere. So I do think this continues the trend of predictions of the demise of a storage technology that really doesn't quite come to pass. We're still seeing all kinds of storage technologies deployed in hyperscalers. And one of the things we know for sure about the hyperscalers is they build architectures that are specific to workloads. This is the way you get that cost-effective scaling. And so we saw things like object storage turning up on flash first, and progressively we'll see more things using more flash out in these cloud providers. So yes, it's awesome that there's more flash storage being used at huge scale in these cloud data centers, and it's good for business and good for the environment. But no, it's not the end of any other particular technology. We don't really see technology going away that way. Spinning rust will be around for a very long time, just like streaming rust or tape has been around for a long time, and its demise has been called for many years. The first week of any new presidential administration is a flurry of activity. One of the items that slipped through the news coverage last week was an announcement from the US Department of Homeland Security that fired all outside advisors from all of the committees, according to a report from Reuters. One of these review boards was in the middle of investigating a recent spate of attacks caused by the Chinese-aligned group Salt Typhoon. And we've been covering this for a few months, but apparently all external committee members have been removed from all of these committees, all of these third-party non-government people who maybe have some expertise in this. So if the Salt Typhoon investigation is effectively unstaffed, does that mean, Tom, that it's completely dead?
Well, I think everybody else thinks that it's completely dead. The question is, how does Salt Typhoon feel about this? Oh, that's right. They don't care because they got away scot-free. Now, this might be the first part of this episode where I'm railing against the government, but this is one of those funny things that happens. And I'm going to put on my CEO hat here for a minute. Just took over the job, got all the budget reports out. I'm like, hey, what are we spending money on this quarter? And I'm going to go down there and I'm going to be like, okay, well, we're spending on this and we're spending on that. This to me should be one of those things that we should not have fired the people about. It's an active investigation. We're trying to figure out exactly what they have, what they got, and what they're going to do with it. And to me, that should supersede anyone saying, well, I don't want to pay for that. Well, I don't know, have a bake sale. Or better yet, that should be like an independent panel, or that should be a special prosecutor or something. The reason why is because that happened in October and we still don't know the full breadth of it. I mean, I have seen news reports as late as like the last few days where they're saying, oh yeah, they got more than just metadata. They probably got actual data from the affected devices and the communications. If I were the person sitting behind the Resolute desk, you could better believe I'd want answers to that. Absolutely want answers to that. But this is a casualty of bigger political maneuvering where people tend to minimalize the impact that previous administrations have had, or they want to put their own particular stamp on it. I'm not saying that there was pressure to do this. I think this is more of an accident than it was anything else. But if I were the Department of Homeland Security, I'd be rearranging some things to get that group back together. And I also love how in the letter it said, oh, you guys can reapply. It's totally fine if you want to. Yeah. How many times have you reapplied for a job that you've got fired from for no good reason? Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. So I don't think we're going to hear the end of that by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't know when we'll hear the next chapter of it. We all know by now that AI is very good at consuming information, but what happens when a security researcher manages to get it to eat its own tail? In this particular case, that trap is called Nepenthes. And if you're a science nerd, you'll go over to Wikipedia and learn that that is named after a carnivorous pitcher plant. The trap is designed to halt AI algorithms that are crawling the internet for all kinds of data without respecting limits on crawling, such as, robots.txt. The system generates false links that contain garbage information and then generates additional links that loop back to the site itself. Now, there is a link in the story in the show notes that lets you try this out for yourself, and you're going to get really bored with it super fast because you can see right through it and you know that it's a bunch of garbage. But the AI doesn't know that it's a garbage, and it's going to basically consume all kinds of power and memory and resources iterating through this loop until somebody looks up and realizes that something's going on. Al, have we finally gotten to the point where AI pushback has become more offensive in nature?
Well, it certainly seems this is more than just politely asking people not to come and index my stuff and not to come and use it to train your AI without actually giving proper consent. And I think it is a symptom that there are a whole bunch of bad actors or poorly disciplined actors out there who are trying to harvest as much information as possible, mostly in order to train new AIs, but potentially for less pleasant purposes as well. And that the simple lack of respect that a lot of these data gathering tools and automated tools will apply has led to this kind of behavior of let's make it hard for them. Let's make it less cost effective for them to go out and try and gather information by simply wasting their time. It's a little bit like when a scam caller phones you and you string them along, or you put them on the phone with your memory deficient elder relatives who will talk to them for hours and hours and just use up their time and their resources. It's the same kind of behavior going on here, but at a nicely automated scale, so we don't have to find enough people with enough memory deficiency to keep all of these bots going. I think it is good that it is very clear to a human that these things are looping and not going anywhere useful. And probably what we'll see is analytics added to the crawlers that are going out and disrespecting our information sources, crawling the places that where the robots.txt says don't. We'll see that those crawlers will become more intelligent and will recognize this kind of looping back behavior. And so it'll again be a bit of an arms race maybe between the enthusiasts who say, I want to protect my data from these crawlers, and the crawler creators who want to go and harvest more of our data. So it's an interesting thing. I think it's a really good line in the sand to say, we are going to waste your time if you start misusing our data or disrespecting our data. It's not quite the same as securing out that data or potentially presenting the data you want to keep out of those crawlers in a way that is unfriendly to the crawlers. So we'll see how this plays out over time. I don't think this is the end game of trying to protect our public but proprietary data from being misused by third parties in ways that we don't consent to. Swedish authorities have impounded a vessel that they suspect caused damage to an undersea internet cable last week. It's been a bit of a story that's been coming to us, building up over time over the last couple of months, because two other cables owned by Finland were damaged back in December. And whilst the flag that's been impounded is flagged in Malta, it's rumoured to be part of a shadow fleet and operated by Russian interests, who of course are under embargo and being watched very closely. These vessels are reported to have caused damage to a number of cables in the Baltic Sea and elsewhere, but authorities are unsure if the damage is deliberate or may have been caused by incompetence, and we sometimes suggest that you don't ascribe to malice things that can be attributed fully to incompetence. Does this sound like incompetence, Tom, or does this sound like an attack?
Well, why can't it be both? I am a huge fan of Hanlon's razor. For those of you out there, Al nailed it. Why believe it's malice when there's every possibility that this is just a bunch of idiots, but useful idiots. So first of all, you have to understand that there is potentially, we think maybe, we don't know, a group of vessels that are flagged in other countries, like Malta, that are sailing around and they're doing illegal things, right? Like carrying embargoed goods from an embargoed country like Russia to places that wouldn't normally accept them, all kinds of craziness, right? Well, the problem is that if you're running an off-the-books operation, you can't really hire the best folks. Like you can't get a good union crew or some longshoremen or even merchant marines. You have to get, well, one step above pirates. And that's what they're wondering here. And not only that, but you really can't use the best ships of the line either, because when they get impounded, because they're going to get impounded, you're going to lose the ship. So if you're using questionable ships and a questionable crew, and then you're going to tell them to target undersea cables, look, I love a good conspiracy as much as the next person, and there is every possibility that they were encouraged to weigh anchor in certain spots. But I don't think that this was told to them as, comrade, take out their undersea cables and the internet will be ours. I think it's more along the lines of, hey, if you guys want to drag your anchor for like 10 miles right around this area, we're not going to cry about it. It's good that the Swedes have impounded the ship, because then that means that they'll be able to take a look at it, understand what's going on, and maybe put some more meat behind these rumors. But ultimately, until we see a bigger spate of this, and I'll be honest with you, 3 is starting to be more than a coincidence. We don't know exactly what to do. So unless we're going to turn the Baltic into a NATO lake for real and basically tell people, all right, everybody going in and out of here is going to be impounded and verified, I don't know what there is to do about that, other than maybe armoring the undersea cables a little bit more, or, I don't know, using satellite internet. Who knows? Agentic AI is being promoted as yet the next big wave where generative AI tools get to not just talk to us, but take actions on our behalf. OpenAI has added their agent technology called Operator as part of their Pro subscription. Can we trust these AI models to act on our behalf and in our best interests? Is this really the start of Skynet, or is it just a way for OpenAI to try to get some revenue back to offset the huge cost of training GPT-4?
So agents are interesting. I always like systems that close a loop, not just provide me some information, but take action on it for me, or at least enable me to take action. So I like the idea of agents. I like having a system that learns what needs to be done and actually does the thing that needs to be done, particularly as we've said, I want agents to do the things that are boring and dull for me. I don't want them to do the exciting and fun things. So having a bunch of agents that deal with, I don't know, small tasks in my environment, maybe automatically summarizing phone calls for me, or automatically making bookings when I've promised somebody I would make a booking for them. I forgot to send a gift basket to somebody for nearly a week this month, and it's somewhat embarrassing that I'd forgotten. If an agent had been looking at the stream of things that I'd committed to, the agent could have taken that action for me. But I'm a bit concerned, though, because it seems these agents are sitting on the back of large language models. And these large language models are infamous for hallucinations, for just making stuff up. Well, are they going to make up things and take actions based on those made-up ideas that are fictional? That doesn't sound quite so helpful. I can make those mistakes all by myself, and probably going to be more aware that those mistakes are going on. So I'm not entirely convinced that this is a good path for using LLMs as the center of our agents. We need some really strong guardrails around that. And of course, this is the beginning of the robots taking action for themselves. So maybe it is the start of Skynet. There has been some suggestion around AIs that are actually creating their own AIs. And so we're getting some self-replicating. And this is once you enable the self-replicating to take action, and particularly the physical world, then we are heading towards that possibility of Skynet. Not that I think we're going to end up with Terminators and Skynet along the way. But very significantly, I think, is that these agents with OpenAI are only part of the paid subscription. Now, it's $200 a month as the paid subscription, so it's not a vast amount of money for a corporate. It's a bit more expensive than I'd want to be paying for a bunch of agents to take action for me. But I think it is some of that incentive of OpenAI trying to find ways to actually be commercially viable, to get some income back, because they have spent hundreds of millions of dollars building these large language models, and they really do need to get that money back to be able to return money back to their investors. So yeah, I think there's some interesting things going on here, and Sam Altman saying that 2025 is going to be the year of agents and agentic AI. Absolutely. Stay tuned for AI Field Day this week as well. Don't miss out. This week's been dominated by the discussion about a new company called DeepSeek. Their app shot to #1 in both the Apple and Android marketplaces practically overnight. And the magic behind this newest AI darling is actually more interesting than the applications themselves. It utilizes a new model dubbed R1, and DeepSeek says that R1 was developed similarly to OpenAI's O1 model, but done for a reported $6 million. That number's a fraction of the cost of competing software from other companies. DeepSeek also released the model weights for free, licensed under the Open MIT license, so everyone can look at them. The stock market, took heed and promptly dropped on the news. Huge drops, particularly in companies like NVIDIA, who've been riding a wave of AI. And there's been a lot of discussion, but some analysts, particularly our analysts, are urging some caution because something isn't quite right with this story. Stephen Foskett has some real insights on how this is actually playing out and what might really be happening. Tom, do you have some insights on what's playing out here? What's actually happening?
I do, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. It's not quite what the industry is making it out to be right now. And you know that by the fact that while everything dipped on Monday afternoon, it's actually back kind of where it was or close to it. There's a lot to unpack here. And I know that Stephen did an amazing job of kind of going over this on TechStrong Gang, and Daniel Newman's been out there making the rounds because he is kind of our expert when it comes to these things. But there's a few things that you need to understand because as is the case with most of these things, there's some things that are not being told, right? So the first thing you have to understand is that no, DeepSeek did not develop this model for $6 million. They probably had some of it underwritten by various other things, but they also, if they built it on any other thing out there, they didn't build it for $6 million. That would be like me saying that, my dad bought me a car for $50,000 and then I spent $10,000 on it to turn it into a race car. Does that mean that I have a $10,000 race car, or does that mean I have a $60,000 race car? Well, it depends on if you want to consider the gift or the pre-work before I started adding on to it. This is what I would expect to see from a company who is building something kind of in parallel to OpenAI's O1 model. If you know that they have done all that hard work and you can kind of replicate 95% of it, then yeah, it's going to look amazing, right? And yes, they released the model. So the other thing to understand is that yes, they released the model weights openly. They did not release the entire code base. It's not open source in the way that you and I think about it. It's not free as in beer. It's not even free as in freedom. It is just freely available for you to look at. It still has some issues. As researchers have pointed out, a scant 24 hours later, there are still some things that if you ask it particular questions, it will not answer them. We've seen that from a lot of models. They're trying to hide ways to get illegal information or to discuss sensitive topics that are uncomfortable for the backers of those technologies to want to discuss. So it's got its flaws, right? But I think that what it is causing is a shift in the market where people are starting to say, well, if they could build something similar to this with the embargoed technology that we've allowed them to have, does that mean that we need to have the embargoed technology, or do we need to have the kinds of technology that we've been trying to sell? And I think that one of the things that Stephen pointed out that is super important to understand is that this is effectively the first shot in the post-LLM world, right? We spent all of this time and all of this effort building ChatGPT and making it so magical and important, and now everybody can build it. That's what DeepSeek basically said, is we can build a rival to your model cheap and quick. And if you remember, back at CES, that's effectively what Jensen Huang said too. We're not doing that anymore. We're moving on to the next part. I mean, the story about the OpenAI agentic AI is a perfect example of that. I don't need an AI to summarize articles and write term papers for me. I need AI to do things. I need the Star Trek computer, right? Set a course for this system. I don't need a word salad of how to chart a course. I need you to do it for me, and then we go. So I think that this is what I would consider more of a disruptive element. I think it's going to make some people ask some hard questions, but I also think that given another 24 hours, the PR departments for these companies will definitely have a good answer. I just think that it kind of landed in a weird time where people just weren't ready to see that yeah, we can get pretty close. But remember, close is not only good in horseshoes and hand grenades, and we're throwing neither of those things into the market right now. Closer look time, because there have been some announcements that we have covered a lot here on the rundown, which could be impacted by a breaking news story. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the early days of any U.S. government involve a lot of change, a lot of new orders, a lot of announcements, and it's been about a week since the current U.S. administration has taken up the office, and they announced a plan to impose some tariffs on Taiwan for a variety of goods. Well, that would be things like pharmaceuticals and steel and computer chips. The tariff reportedly was going to be about 25%. However, it could be as high as 100%. In further comments, the president said that the goal of the move was to lure companies back to the U.S. to manufacture chips domestically. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, wasn't that the point of the CHIPS Act that was passed last year? You're right. In comments, the CHIPS Act was specifically called out as being problematic because it simply just gave money away instead of punishing companies with additional taxes to change their behavior. Now, we are recording this when the news is just about 24 hours old. So it's kind of a developing situation, and we don't actually know exactly what's going to happen. But you know what? We're going to dive in anyway, because this is the rundown. So Al, what is the ultimate goal here by tariffing all of these chips coming out of Taiwan?
So the objective is to make it cost effective to produce things domestically within the United States. The objective of tariffs is to make it more expensive to bring things in from overseas, and therefore make it easier for more expensive local products to compete. Right? So fundamentally, the imbalance is that it's much more cost effective to produce these chips offshore and pharmaceuticals offshore, but current US government wants things happening on US shore, even if that means higher cost to consumers. And that's what the tariffs do. They increase the cost to consumers for imported goods. They make it easier for locally produced goods to be cost effective. Now, the net result is then that it makes more sense for an organization that would previously have produced product overseas to make that product within the United States. And that's the objective, is to increase the production of product within the United States, increase employment within the United States, but at the cost of increasing the cost of the products that those people are consuming. So the long-term goal would be to have more chips being produced within the United States, and doing so by increasing the cost of goods. Now that increase comes as more tax take, so maybe there'll be some tax relief for hopefully lower income people who are more subject to the increase in the cost of these products. So hopefully there'll be some tax relief. You can tell I'm kind of socialist leaning, as we tend to be here in New Zealand. And we'd hope that the net result is more manufacturing in the US, revitalization of some of the cities that were gutted through the 80s, 90s, and earlier this century as manufacturing moved offshore. But the downside is, Tom, you're going to be paying more for those chips because they're being produced in a place where they're not as cost effective to produce. Are you happy with that choice, Tom?
I'm not, because I was happy with the previous arrangement. I thought the CHIPS Act was doing a very good job of luring companies to come back and start building their manufacturing facilities. In fact, it actually lured TSMC. And TSMC said that they were going to build a fab in Arizona and everything was going to be hunky-dory. And, well, we changed the boss at the top of the ladder, and guess what? Now I've got to show everybody that I'm the one in charge. And it's not enough for me to give you the carrot. Now I have to give you the stick. You're going to do this or you're going to pay for it. Where are those foundry buildings, by the way? I'm assuming they're very close to completion so that people can move right in and start manufacturing, right? They're not. They're still years away. I don't know what the goal is. Is it to get TSMC to negotiate for something? Last I checked, the U.S. federal government doesn't buy things from TSMC. I mean, they do, but not in the bulk quantities that we would see companies like NVIDIA and Apple do. In fact, what's going to happen is that TSMC is going to ship the chips anyway, and the next iPhone is going to be more expensive. That next NVIDIA card is going to be expensive. And who's getting paid on that? Well, the government's getting paid on it. But for what reason? TSMC is not going to care. They're running their fabs at full capacity right now. They have customers lined up wanting to buy their stuff. They're selling it to those customers at whatever they were going to sell it to them on Friday. It's just that now the companies that are importing those chips have to pay more because that's how tariffs work. This is not going to benefit the people who are barely making ends meet and want to buy an iPhone because their work now requires them to have a smartphone to be able to check their schedule or do their job, whatever. No, this is about the prestige of the US government, and it's going to backfire because when everything becomes 100% more expensive because of the chips that are going in it and people stop buying things because they can't afford them, then we're going to see exactly what happens when there's another Great Recession, because that's literally what's going on. Folks, just go watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The thing that made Ben Stein famous, he's literally talking about a tariff act backfiring and causing the Great Depression. That was about 100 years ago. I'm trying to stay on the technical side of this. There's a lot of political bleed over between it. But the key technical thing here to understand is that if you impose a tariff on this country in the next month, there is no way that they are going to be able to have a fabrication facility built in the next year. That means that everything that's going to start coming into this country is either going to be slowed down because they can't afford to bring it in, or it's going to cost so much that nobody's going to be able to buy it. And I'm assuming that the hope from the current administration is that that will force TSMC to come to the table and negotiate. For what? Lowering costs? They're not going to lower costs. You give us free this, or you promise to build a factory. They already did promise to build a factory, remember? It's probably a good thing that that factory's not online, or they'd find a loophole where they could ship all their boards to the factory and then claim that they put one more chip in it and it was assembled in the US and it's not subject to tariffs. And I know that happened for a fact because I used to work for a company that imported a whole bunch of TVs as computer monitors and put TV tuners in them in South Dakota. And suddenly they got around the import tariff on TVs. Businesses are going to business. That's just how it is. I think that this is posturing of the wrong kind. And I think that it's going to impact tech people. And it's going to take NVIDIA and Apple and companies that are working closely with TSMC standing up and saying, stop this or it will backfire. Well, as you can tell, it's definitely been a week around here at the Rundown. But the good news is that the Rundown isn't the only thing going on this week. If you head over to techfieldday.com right now, you can tune in and watch AI Field Day live. We've had a lot of stories on here about OpenAI, about DeepSeek, about lots of other things. And you know that those things are going to be discussed during AI Field Day. Steven's got a great group of people out there right now, and they can't wait to talk to you about what's going on. And then coming up next month, Al, you're going to be doing something else that's a pretty hot commodity as well.
Yes, I will be hosting Cloud Field Day, 19th and 20th of February. And we'll be looking at some of those topics we brought up in the rundown as well, particularly around the cost of running data center infrastructure and cloud infrastructure. I think there'll be some interesting stories around how to build applications, how to operate environments. Of course, Tom, you've also got things going on in February.
I do. I'm going to be in Amsterdam for Cisco Live Europe. We're going to be getting a look at some of the latest releases from our friends over at Cisco. And we have a great group of people who are going to be lined up around the table to ask the kinds of questions that you want to hear answered. And then in March, we are going to be hearing from some networking companies at Networking Field Day. That's March 19th and 20th. We're excited to hear from companies like Selector AI and BT. And we may have a couple more in store. You're going to have to check out techfieldday.com and see when we get them added to the site, because it should be some fun. We want to thank you all for watching the Gestalt IT Rundown today. Remember, we publish our new episodes every Wednesday, and you can find them on our YouTube channel. You can also find them on your favorite podcast application of choice. Just search for the Gestalt IT Rundown. If you want to bookmark techstrong.tv, you can check us out there as well. And you know that we are everywhere on TechStrong and Future Group, technologies and shows and all kinds of content out there. We'll be back next Wednesday with more interesting looks into the IT news of the week. Until then, for Alistair Cook and Tom Hollingsworth, thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of your January.